Buona Ninja. Like that. How is it? Have I done okay so far? Thank you. There's a lot of you, so I'm still a little bit nervous, but hopefully I'll calm down. My friend is going to set up the equipment. Just to give you a little bit of context, I am going to try and take the ass out of assessment. But I would like to have a little bit of serious context before that. My wonderful colleagues here at MUT will place in cyberspace for you some materials, which will include slides, and also a toolkit which you can take to assist you to think about the work that you do in terms of assessment. And maybe it will be useful to work with colleagues. And I would always say with everything that I do, adopt, adapt, develop further, or reject it if it doesn't fit in your unique context. But I think there's always a danger that when something's difficult, we don't try. So one of my mottos is, have a go and fail, rather than not have a go at all. Is that okay? Yes. Great, now I'm feeling a little bit better. Okay, so I'm Mark, and I'm from the north of England. Here's a picture of England. The north, Liverpool, that's where the best football in the world happens. No, not Manchester United, or Arsenal, or Chelsea, they're all minor clubs. And the most important one is Liverpool. You could say Leicester City's okay, I suppose. For an amateur club, they're doing okay. But I'm from a place where you might recognize also this music.
Yeah, you are old school.
Okay, good dancing. Yeah. Well, now I'm feeling more relaxed. Hey, have fun there, little. Oh, John Lennon, Paul McCartney. That's enough from you guys. Shut up. So over here, you'll see a picture of my very handsome younger brother. And I'm from Edgehill University. This is me in former times before I was stressed out with all the work I have to do. That's another story. And I'm actually a long way away in Durban, far away. My grandfather came to Durban as a merchant seaman. He ran away from the ship for 1 year without getting arrested, and then he went back to the UK. My father, then he came back to Durban, and as a merchant seaman also. So for me, it's quite magical to have the privilege to come back here to such warm climate, but also warm people. Those of you who know me previously would know I have a great affection for South Africa and like to be here. So, without further ado, I'm from Edgehill University. We all have to do this. We have to mention our own university's names, don't we? But last year was the Times University of the Year, and it's a mixture of the old and the new, and I'm proud of it. Because 125 years ago, it was the first institution that, wait for this, allowed women to train as teachers, irrespective of their religion. So my university colours are all based upon the women's suffrage movement, the suffragettes and winning the vote. So we have a proud heritage. Now, the context of the conference is 21st century skills and approaches to teaching for learning. Teaching for learning. I haven't said teaching and learning, which I hope will become clear as I speak to you this morning and also tomorrow. So there's a connection with what I'm going to say today and tomorrow. And I'm not going to be a slave to the slides and read them to you, but give you a flavour of each, because I want you to revisit them later. And I also want to talk about the principles of assessment for learning. Assessment for learning, not just assessment of learning. So, those of you who had an opportunity to read some of the stuff I've written for Dr. Joe, for the publication that you've received, will be aware that I've said that it's important that we think about the future for our students and the fit that they have in the society as citizens, in their economy, in their agency to support themselves and their families, etc. All the things I know we would together subscribe to. And I suggest to you that if the students experience assessment, which is authentic as possible, which is related to their own unique context in South Africa and also beyond, then it's more likely that the skills, knowledge, values, attributes, and humanity will follow if our assessment is carefully conceived. And that's where I want to go in terms of talking about assessment a bit later. Now, in my university, do you have Marmite in South Africa?
Yes.
Yeah, love it or hate it, yeah? But I sit in committees, you know? Anybody sit in committees? Yeah? Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah. Well, one of the things I say is, what difference will it make to the students on a Monday morning? Whether it be something in facilities management, whether it be an assessment strategy, whether it be something about bursaries, whether it be something about the residences or whatever. But the core, and this is where the accountant loves me, but it doesn't know I'm quite a subversive little liver puppy. And I say, well, the business of a university is about, over here, the creation of knowledge, but the application and integration of knowledge, particularly into learning and teaching. So bringing research into learning and teaching. And all of our mission, policy, aims, and strategy, etc., should face towards this simple business model. This is where the accountants love me. If there's excellent learning, which is brought about by excellent teaching, with assessment and feedback to students, which is highly developmental and integrated with the teaching, the learning will constantly improve. And if we have a climate and culture of evaluation and research, we will constantly improve what we do. And in my experience, because I've been teaching 150 years now, I'm a lot younger than I look. If you look at assessment and feedback, if we get that bit right, it can have a profound impact on students' development, their motivation, their engagement with their curriculum, etc. It's like some of my students say, yeah, Mark, we like it when you get it real, man. So authenticity is quite important. So I want to talk a little bit about the case for active learning, and I'll develop this tomorrow, so I'm going to skip a couple of slides. But I want to just start with Confucius Institute. I'm the director of the Confucius Institute, the Chinese Language and Culture Institute in my country. But I like Confucius because he actually was talking about active learning a long time ago. And then he gets some dodgy science from William Glasser from the 80s, basically saying, you know, just to listen to somebody going, blah, 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 beautiful joke, blah, 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 or I'm going to change my position, blah, blah, blah. That didactic sage on the stage isn't going to achieve necessarily an impact upon the skills, knowledge, values, and attributes that we want our graduates to have. So, graduates who should have had an experience, have had multiple opportunities to become skillful, to rehearse those skills, to develop those skills, to hone those skills, to work with others in a way which is about respect and humanity. But this is a case for active learning, which I will revisit tomorrow. But I think in modern curricula, in modern classrooms, the invitation is a shift from the left to the right, from surface learning, where I will listen and I will write it down. I've been a dutiful student, I've written it. I've read the paper, I haven't understood it, but I've read it, I've been dutiful. A shift from memorization and recall, note-taking, etc., to this right-hand side, where students are encouraged in the teaching, the active learning experiences that they have, and indeed in the assessment experiences that they have, to be thinking, discovering, constructing knowledge, restructuring knowledge, thinking and talking about their own learning, etc., etc., etc. And this leads to what the literature describes as deeper learning, learning that lasts, if we think about Bill McKeachie, that old sage from the United States. If it's good learning, it will last. If it's superficial learning, it will not last. It will be ephemeral. And if you look at Gibbs and Coffey in 2000, they characterized surface learning as task-orientated, atavistic, and the focus is on passing the test. I will pass the test, therefore I will have skills, knowledge, values, and attributes that will sustain me for my life. In 15 different jobs, in a complex society, as an agent of my family, as an agent of my community, as an agent of my industry, whatever that might be, an agent of my environment. It isn't enough just for me to stand in the front and be the sage on the stage. Although I'm going to break some rules today by doing just that. The action really, guys, is about deeper learning, understanding, meaning, synthesis, applying elsewhere, and back to Confucius. To simply have the knowledge alone is a dangerous thing. To have the knowledge, to apply it and integrate it into the classroom will lead to learning in a profound, sustainable, life-changing and changing fully, unique situated context that our students will enter. So, if you look at this diagram, If we look on the left-hand axis, we have passive learning, like the standard lecture. I can bore for England, I'm in the England boring Olympic team. Or we can have active learning, such as problem-based learning. And if we look at the vertical axis, we have memorizing, which is relatively low-level learning, and note-taking, moving up to theorizing and applying knowledge. Is that not what people do in the world of work? In the world of their communities, solving problems, community problems, solving political problems? Knowledge alone does not just solve problems. Knowledge alone does not create. So our teaching, I suggest, has to have not only active learning, but assessment which impacts upon these types of characteristics. Higher level engagement and a movement in the trajectory where we have what was quoted as academic Susan, working in a highly sophisticated way as a student, who's applying and integrating knowledge and discovery. That's the definition of the scholarship of teaching and learning also. Application and integration of knowledge alongside discovery. And we need to get Robert, non-academic Robert. I'm sorry, poor Robert gets picked upon. This is straight from literature. But we want to move Robert from a more passive note-taker, who will know the capital of England is London. So what? What use? I actually don't like London. The football's terrible. But we want to do active learning to move non-academic Robert on a sensible trajectory. And this is where I want to situate assessment. Because if we have teaching and assessment, teaching, learning and assessment that focus increasingly on skills, and here's a typical list of them, and I put these here for a deliberate reason, because it chimes with my wonderful colleague Dr. Joe's introduction. This is what we want. We don't want people who just know stuff. We want people who know things and are smart, can apply, can work with others, can negotiate, can have influence, also have a heart and have values, which we must not forget. And I know my friend Mark will allude to some very thoughtful things about the idea of a university where students flourish in a community. I'll say no more for now. And it's interesting, you go back to 2008, and this is replicated around the world. What do employers say they want? And again, Joe talked about this. Have we got it right? Are we producing graduates that are going to be desired by employers? That's part of the story, but it's a very important part, isn't it? If I haven't got a job, what agency have I got? What difference can I make? But look, communication, teamwork, self-confidence, self-motivation, self-management, problem-solving, numeracy, commitment, intellectual skills, and increasingly an ability to operate these skills in cyberspace in a globally connected place. Banking no longer happens. I went to the ATM yesterday. It is what's the place? Not far from here. A big building with a market inside. The workshop. Yeah, and I just went to the ATM. It connects to my bank account and goes, oh, you can have a little bit. But we're globally connected. I can speak to my friends in the office on my phone. But increasingly, these skills and attributes are desired by employers, but also are being exercised in cyberspace. So we need to teach, we need to assess in ways that will be impactful upon these developments. And my suggestion is that people won't just get that by listening. They need to interact, they need to practice, they need to rehearse, etc. So, I think assessment is often the glue. Assessment and the feedback that we give to students is the glue in the experience. It needs to be seen as an integral process, part of teaching, and not something which is separate, not something which is at the end, something which has developmental and formative functions, not just measurement functions. And I'll come back to a story about that in a bit. So should we take the ask out of assessment? When you say the word ask, is it a rude word in South Africa? Oh, it's a donkey. Oh, thank you for helping me with that one. In the UK, it's a word that sometimes we use and people go, oh, that's not very nice. But you know, I don't care. Let's have some fun. As they say in Thailand, Samu? Anybody from Thailand? No, shame. Okay. Oh, you may remember from many years ago, a comedian called Ben Elton. Yeah, a great supporter of Nelson Mandela. A very left-wing comedian in the UK. And his father is a nuclear physicist. And he's from Eastern Europe and he's very small. And he tells very long stories. For a short man, his stories are very long. And everybody doesn't want to sit with him at dinner because of his long stories. But as soon as I see him, I grab him. Oh, Lewis, can I sit with you? Tell me some stories. And we use this word enhancement a lot in our quality assurance processes. And he said, Mark, it's all something, he said a little bit naughty. But he said enhancement is about doing things better. And that's constantly trying to improve. And that's about being open and willing to have a go and trying new ideas. But it's also about doing better things. And this is where I know my colleague, Joe McCoy, is constantly trying to promote the scholarship of teaching and learning, which is about, with particular focus on assessment today, the application and integration of knowledge, global knowledge and evidence bases, and practices which are well theorized and well tried out by real frontline practitioners. So I can talk in a way which is a very lofty discourse, but I want to really try and shoot from the hip a little bit about my own practice, because I still teach students. That's my favorite thing. I can get away from the bureaucracy, close the door in the classroom and have fun with my students. But Lewis often invites us to apply and integrate knowledge, not to be creative, be open-minded. Okay, can I tell you a story? Are you all sitting comfortably?
Yes, sir.
Then I shall begin. I taught my donkey to dance. I assessed it too, said Mark. Oh yeah, I taught my donkey to dance. I assessed it too, the teacher. But it isn't dancing, said John. It isn't dancing. Well, maybe there's something not so good about the teaching and the assessment. Maybe there's something lacking that's lacking in authenticity. This looks like me when I've been drinking in a castle. Another point I'd like to make is about assessment that is inauthentic, where it's 1,000 years removed or 1,000 meters removed from a student's real-world context, where it becomes less meaningful. And I'll come back to that notion of authenticity. I taught my donkey to dance and I assessed it too. But it isn't dancing, said Joe. Something not working with this teaching and assessment. I never said it would learn, said Mark. Yeah? I taught it. I assessed it. I've been dutiful. I've done as Einstein said, the same stuff I've been doing for years. But these things still won't dance. So, I like donkeys. I like stories. I want to remember the story. And if you never remember anything else, you say, oh, that's the guy, he's a donkey. I taught my donkey to dance. I assessed it too, it isn't dancing. I never said it learned. So no. Well, you might as well have taught it to skateboard then. I'll come back to that story a little bit tomorrow. Some headlines then. I think assessment is very fundamental in terms of student success. And there are persistent challenges, aspects that we may sometimes feel saddled with. Donkey saddled? Oh gosh, I'm trying. So today's session is about practices for Monday morning at work. I really want to take you into my own world of practice and stuff that you can have a go at. And taking the ass out of this stuff, the assessment donkey, I think is a vehicle to stimulate interactions and hopefully we can have a little bit of fun. It's quite interesting how people talk about asses, donkeys I mean, stupid, stubborn, foolish persons. Well, if I just think that teaching and lecturing at students as the sole mode of teaching is going to get them to be skillful in the broad ways I've alluded to, I'm probably a bit of an ass. Here you go. And if assessment doesn't achieve learning, it doesn't contribute to learning, it probably has been donkey work. Donkey work now, informal, tedious, drudgery. You work hard. Why do assessment? Is it going to lever learning as well as measuring it? Oops. I couldn't help but use it. But here, another little story. I'm sorry the colours have changed a little bit. Audience participation time. No matter how many times I weigh my donkey, it doesn't get any fatter. I want you to think for a moment, does that trigger any thoughts about assessment? And then I want to see if you're going to help me out to trigger some thoughts in me that I can share with you as a way into talking about principles of assessment and feedback. No matter how often I weigh my donkey, it doesn't get any fatter. Any thoughts? This is where I wait and feel a little bit uncomfortable. now I'm happy because a lot of people smiling. People not smiling. They sit here like this. I go, oh, I must be in London. So, any thoughts about this trick? Are you shy? A colleague here, thank you so much for helping me out.
I think the first question would be, is waiting an input for it to get better?
Thank you. Oh, I think you must be a scientist. Yeah. Is weighing an input to make it fatter? And that makes me think about the idea, if we just weigh the donkey and measure it, does it have any input value along the journey to the end where we weigh it? Hey, my students say, Mark, Prof Mark, I really want to pass my test. I said, yeah, sure. What's the secret? I really want to do well. I like that one. Even better. Can you tell me the answers? No, I will not. There may not be an answer, a single answer. Universities are complex places, aren't they? They work with uncertainty and complex problems, ill-formed problems. So's the world, like that. I think one of the things we have to do for our students is to help them to understand that sometimes the world is so complex there's not an immediate answer. That's the stuff of negotiation, politics, the application and integration of data, etc., into trying to make sense of our complexities. So I really like that. Unless the assessment has some input value, unless it does something which we say is developmental or formative, it's probably donkey work. That was a gift, thank you so much. You know, I always feel very nervous, so I always bring my best friend. This is my little friend called Edgy, from Edge Hill. Yeah? And I always give Edgy, this is Edgy's little brother, by the way, he's not the original one. Oh, you? No! This guy I always give him to the person who tells me first time, so thank you so much. Because it can be quite lonely out here. There's all of these people and only one of me. I'm still sweating a little bit, but I'll be okay. All right, so let's move on. So I think assessment must be a vehicle for learning. What really is donkey work? You know, you like the little vehicle in the back? Make the connection between the picture and the language. Oh, I'm trying. And here is my donkey in the secret garden of assessment. I want to talk to you about assessment for learning and the place of feedback. Assessment for learning, not just assessment of learning, not just weighing donkeys. I want assessment that's going to make my donkeys smarter. It's not that students are donkeys, it's only a metaphor. It makes them smarter, it makes them more skillful, gives them opportunities to exercise and apply and integrate their knowledge in contexts that often are very important to them or their employers, or in the unique context, the situation of South Africa, which is close to their hearts and important to them and their families and their communities, as well as the importance of getting a job. So I want to talk about principles of assessment and feedback for learning, and I think making assessment explicit allows students into the secret garden of assessment. I had at university 112 years ago, when I was at university, I used to get tests, and the tests bore no resemblance to the things I was taught. And if you were smart, you know, you got through because you could guess what was in the lecturer's head. That's Fazlul Karim. I know he's into hearts and he tells stories about elephants, so I'll read a little bit about the elephant heart. And yeah, there's a bloody question on the elephant heart. I was a physiologist. But I think we need to be more explicit and allow students to understand how assessment works. It's like putting me onto a rugby field and I've never played before, I don't know the rules. I'm going to look kind of foolish. If I know the rules, I'm likely to show what I can do. If I don't know the rules, I'm actually marginalized. Either by the language of assessment, or the fact I've never had the process before. Here, here's a great example. On successful completion of this module, students will be able to articulate an oral argument showing their understanding of the contrasting theories X and Y. So I'm going to lecture at them for 12 weeks, blah, 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 point, blah, 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 occasional picture to keep them interested. And then here comes the assessment. A 3-hour unseen examination. They haven't had the opportunity to practice oral assessment. They haven't had the opportunity to see they haven't had the opportunity to practice oral presentation of arguments. They haven't seen people doing it skillfully. And we give them an exam. which isn't about the skills that we wanted them to develop. So assessment must be aligned. And we mustn't put students in a position where they are in an assessment that they've never experienced before, or they're not very good at. That will exclude them, no matter how brilliant they are. People nodding. I like it. Makes me less nervous. So, some things I'd like to say is that assessment can be really bad and based on poor concepts, and it's expensive in many ways. Expensive in that it's a missed opportunity unless it's for learning. It's expensive if it's donkey work for the academic, lots of measurement without much gain for the students, and importantly, it's donkey work for the students. I think it's assessment that has formative and developmental components, such as students writing small pieces and assessing each other's work, or me giving feedback on a good piece of work and doing that in front of the students, showing them examples. That's developmental and formative. If that's absent, we're missing a trick. Assessment should be aligned. In other words, we want them to be able to show skills of oral argument or visual representation. We don't just give them a test. We give them an assessment which is authentic and linked to the intentions that we design. I think assessment should be motivating. Consider this notion I talk about as harnessed ethical instrumentalism. I often talk about ethical stealth. Sounds like a contradiction. But if I can design assessment which is about showing students' ability to grasp theories X and Y and apply and integrate them, hopefully into a context they've chosen. So your context might be microbrewing, making beer. Your context might be the flow of blood through blood vessels, but you might be very interested in something like the healthiness of blood vessels, for example. But giving people an opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that they've got in their particular discipline and applying them to something which is unique and interesting to them can be quite empowering and motivating. Or in social sciences, applying and integrating knowledge into community-based problems and working with community members. Together, real agency, real authentic assessment opportunities. I think assessment is a real ass or donkey if students just don't understand what's happening to them. They're being excluded. Perhaps unintentionally, but excluded if we don't show them how assessment works. We keep it a secret. It was okay for me. I got through university, nobody had to show me how assessment worked. But I came from a different school system. And I know there's big debates about the preparedness of youngsters and the trick, etc., etc. And it's different large in South Africa. So it's only fair and just that we help students understand how assessment works before we put them through it. If we don't, I think we are marginalising them. So opening up the secret garden is important. And these assertions apply to schools, they apply to universities, they apply to courses in teacher training, etc. But I think assessment can be a nourishing and enabling process, and I'll talk about some practical strategies in a moment, and I'll talk about and reflect upon my own students. I think assessment can actually work out well. Hey, I had an exam the other day. Yeah, before I went to the airport to fly out, I had a viva. Do you have vivas here? Oral assessment? I had an oral assessment from the Higher Education Academy of England for a principal fellowship. Very nervous. And it made me think about how that was conducted. It was very challenging, but it was done in a very human way. Yeah, the questions were very challenging, but the people behaved in a way which it felt like a developmental dialogue. It felt like there wasn't a power base across the table. And I think that was quite an important message about the idea that humans are being assessed and humans are getting feedback. Imagine getting some feedback. I've had this. Mark, this essay is pretty bad. Your other students are so much better than yours. I don't think there's much future for you. Etc., etc. Now, that's terrible, but feedback that doesn't have a human component is quite important. I often, in the UK, we have the Viva for PhD, the assessment Viva for PhD, yeah? And can I show you a little video of it? Because this always reminds me of the Viva. I think assessment, particularly if the relationships are right in assessment, respectful relationship, assessment can be really quite profound and good. Anybody here ever had Budweiser? Yeah? Terrible stuff.
Since I was born, I dreamed of being a Budweiser Clydesdale. Only problem is, I was born a donkey. So all my life I practiced the Clydesdale walk. And the Clydesdale extensions on my lower legs. And then came my big interview.
The Bible.
He looked me in the eye and said, "What makes you think you can be a Clydesdale, son?" And what was my answer?
Well-defended thesis.
I must have said something right.
Apropos of nothing really, I just wanted something that was a little diversion. Something that was a little light for us to continue with. I just need to get this back into the mode, get my glasses on. So I want to try and start moving on now to, can you help me? I cannot see. My eyesight is so bad nowadays. Back into my slideshow. Here. Oh, thank you, my friend. He's been looking after me. He's like my big brother. Thank you, my friend. I want to talk about assessment literacy, and I'll summarize this slide very briefly. If students are confident in assessment because they know how it works, if they understand the language that's being used, they're more likely to get it and succeed. They're not behaving it. If you look at David Bauer's work on independent learning and employability, he's quite profound in the research that suggests that students basically understand how assessment works, and they understand what the purposes of feedback are, and what they're supposed to do with their feedback, they tend to do better. Seems axiomatic, doesn't it? And then finally, Margaret Price from Oxford Brooks says that students, once they understand assessment and they get good feedback and they work on their feedback for improvement, they get a better understanding of what matters. They get a better understanding of what we expect from them. They get a better understanding of the expectations of the reading and the writing and the discourse and the discipline. They do better. They're better able to self-evaluate and move on. So I think we've got a job to help our students become assessment literate. So students need to understand assessment. They need to understand the terms that we use. And hey, induction of students into university from the school system. Are students ever prepared differently in different schools? Do you ever feel that sometimes students may be underprepared? Big issue, huh? So is it important then that if we're going to assess them, that we give them practice at types of assessment? But isn't it powerful that we show them really good pieces of work? And we assess that in front of them. And we show them how we give marks and grade. And we show them the qualities that we're looking for. And we do the same for mediocre work and even bad work, so they understand how you're thinking. It's not telling them the answer, it's helping them to become assessment literate and understand what the expectations are. And that will be different in different disciplines. But to show early on examples of essays which are good and why they're good, and explain from your expert assessment position. To show examples of students doing presentations which are good and explain why they're good and what the expectations are. That's quite powerful, this notion of assessment literacy. Similarly, feedback literacy. There's nothing more powerful than assessing using the criteria and the grading systems in front of students. You assess in front of them, but using as a teaching opportunity because you might project up an essay and you're using the ideas and the facts in the essay to teach, but also using that as an opportunity to grade it and show what matters, and where the high marks are coming from. And then you write some feedback in front of the students. You got these marks because these were the strong things that you said. These are the things that were perhaps in need of further development. And these are some things you should consider. And indeed, these are maybe places you can go to find more information or to go and practice some more skills. Feedback-less development. Hey, how radical to give students some pieces of work which are good and bad and ask them to grade them and write feedback for the human being on the other end. And then to share the feedback and start discussing what the qualities were in the piece of work that they've assessed. That's teaching if the ideas in the example of assessment that they're using, the facts in the example of the assessment that they're using, it could be an essay, it could be a laboratory report, etc. If that's full of good stuff, This is not wasted time, but it's enabling them to understand how assessment works. So feedback literacy is quite key. Formative experiences, development experiences, rehearsal, the opportunity to understand how things work, to rehearse skills of writing, of oracy, of working in teams, etc. are quite key as the developmental experiences before the high risk of a final assessment. Hey, imagine if I've never really written many essays or I've not been very good at it because I didn't know how they worked. Imagine if I come to my first assessment, it's high risk, I might fail. I could be brilliant, but I just don't know how it works. I've never seen the good stuff, and I've never known what's explicitly expected of me. So showing examples is powerful, as is modeling, taking opportunities to assess in front of the students, showing them how it works, and orally articulating from your expert position as assessor how the system works. Showing examples. And then getting students to have a go at assessing and grading themselves. And if you're giving them examples of other students' work, or work that you've written yourself, which is sometimes easier, if it's full of good ideas and full of good factual materials and examples, that's not teaching time wasted. It's actually active learning, but it allows them into the secret garden of assessment. Hey. This is a cycle lane. We have these cycle lane things, and this is one of the kids, one of the students, thinking he's being very funny. I think he's being on the castle. So, back in 2002, there was a thing called the Assessment Reform Group in the UK, and it really said assessment for learning is where the action is. And assessment should have feedback, which is developmental. Assessment should be integrated into the learning, so it's part of the teaching and planned for. So it's developmental, so students are in a position to show what they know and can do. And are not alienated by the process, which is a secret. I'm probably only telling you what good teachers know and do. So if you're feeling confirmed and affirmed, that's cool. So, principles of assessment for learning, I think, are quite important. And I suggest in the toolkit that I've given to my colleagues for you to access online, these principles are presented, and it says, what do you do now? What could you do differently? What things do you need to discuss more? And in the back of the toolkit are the references and synopsis of the ideas from the literature. So if you like, if you're working with other colleagues of academics, it's quite powerful to say, here's a toolkit, a framework of questions we can apply to our own practices to look at doing things better, maybe doing some better things, by applying and integrating knowledge from evidence bases. And that's the stuff that Joe talks about in terms of the scholarship of teaching and learning. So we can use the toolkit, think about what we may do differently and how. So, I'm not going to read through these because I think I've touched base with all of these. It should be developmental. It should be not just measurement at the end. It should think about learner motivation. Can you design interesting assessments? Can you design assessments so that students can look at their own context? There's nothing more powerful for me, for example, I'm a social sciences student, to go and do something in my community as part of my assessment and write about it, and be an agent in my community alongside my community people. That's authentic. It's not like a plastic dancing donkey, it's authentic. Assessment should have constructive guidance about how to improve. Now, assessment and feedback is not just paper exercise. It can be through the questioning and the feedback I give students in my class. That's assessment. And feedback. Sometimes students need to be told that. Sometimes they will undervalue your work as a teacher as somebody who's constantly assessing and giving feedback in action. But important, formative developmental assessment, seeing examples, empowers students to be self-critical, to understand their strengths and weaknesses and areas for development, so they can be reflective and self-managing. Hey, number 10, that should be number 1, huh? Enables all learners to achieve their best and to have their efforts recognized. It's very hard for anybody in the world to challenge them. Do we want our students to succeed? Yeah. Do we want them to get jobs? Of course. Do we want them to make a difference in their society? Oh yeah. So, the question for me is, when one looks at our own practices in our departments, our cognitive disciplines, how do these principles apply in what we do now? And are there some little things we can do differently? And it's often little things that make huge differences in the longer term for our students. Similarly, principles of feedback. These are the SEM Left principles. SEM Left, again, it's all in the toolkit I've been providing online for you. It needs to be developmental. Feedback needs to clarify what's good performance, so students understand what's expected of them and how they can do better next time. Even excellent students at the top end of their game, feedback to become even better is important. Number 6, encourages positive motivational beliefs and self-esteem. I think one of the things I've done with students, when they assess a piece of work for me and they use the criteria for grading and they give you marks to the work, and they write feedback as though there's a student on the other end, one of the things they say is, hey, language we use is really important. It must not be insulting. It must recognize the humanity of the person on the other end. I can fail a test, but doesn't mean I fail as a human being. So students remind me of the human on the other end of the feedback, which I think is quite important. So our challenge is how do we address these principles? What may we do differently? And I would suggest that the toolkit I'm providing is an opportunity for you, or you and your colleagues, to look at some of the principles and say, hey, what can we do now that's good? Let's celebrate. Are there any things we can adopt or adapt or develop further to enhance the formative developmental components of assessment? And can we teach the donkey to dance? Now, this is as close as I'm going to get to over-academizing this, that if we show as experts how assessment works and we consciously articulate how we're assessing in action, with real pieces of work, with good ideas and good facts in them, we are modeling the thoughts of an assessor. We let the students into the secret garden. That gives them mental frameworks or scaffolds that enables them to think about and understanding how the game works. And if we're constantly talking about assessment, particularly as assessors talking out loud and assessing in front of students, if they practice assessing and talk amongst themselves about what matters and what's good and what's bad, that metacognitive activity, that talking about learning, that conscious articulation, makes them more literate about assessment. Let them have a go, low risk, rehearsing, writing and assessing together, giving each other feedback, the power of peer feedback. I've got a group of 750 business students, yeah? I can't take 750 draft essays every week, can I? No way. But what I can do is I can get the students to form small groups, to have criteria, to give each other some peer feedback. Or I can take 30 and glance at them and come up with some generic feedback, which I give to the whole group saying, I'm seeing some emerging strengths and some things that I want you to keep careful of before you do your final assessment. So even with large groups, there are strategies you can use. Because we take students to independence without formative assessment, are they mostly enabled to show us what they know and can do? My suggestion is, that unless we take them on that journey to assessment of the summative type, the end assessment, unless we prepare them for it, they will not show us what they know and can do. And we may inadvertently alienate them to a greater or lesser extent. This is very important for inductions and transitions. I think it's actually quite crucial in terms of throughput. Particularly as in a good curriculum, they go to second year, third year, whatever it is, as they progress through, things become more difficult, more independence is expected of them. If they've not had these fundamental groundings, that expectation of independence becomes something of a problem, because they don't know how it works. So, modeling is about seeing it all. Seeing the criteria, seeing the learning outcomes, students discussing and having a go at assessing pieces of work as a part of teaching. Not every teaching session, that's naive. But in absence of these things, students will not get it. But the explicitness and understanding of assessment gives them mental frameworks. They become able to apply these frameworks and support themselves independently and become better independent learners. So modeling is a key concept. Practicing, we can call it joint construction. Practicing and working together to get greater understanding of assessment, posing questions of the teacher, disagreeing with each other about what's quality and what isn't quality. Powerful. Again, further makes for explicitness. Independence is about being empowered, understanding how things work. We can translate that into bigger picture, can't we? Are we disempowered when we don't understand the rules of engagement? Yes. We don't have the language to engage. We don't have the knowledge to be able to argue and convince and win hearts and minds. So this is about assessment which is full of developmental opportunities as part of the teaching. And it's all about empowering students to succeed. It's not about telling them the answers. It's about, wait for it, skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes, which all contribute to the bigger picture that Mark will talk about in terms of graduate attributes. We can say those things, they're far more complex. The big learning, when I go out of university, is the sum total of all my little learning experiences. A lot of that will be in the classroom. It's not just in the classroom. An assessment can be out there. It can be in industry, authentic assessment. It can be in the community. Applied and integrated knowledge, knowledge transfer. The students working as co-producers, co-researchers with us also is quite powerful. But if they're empowered, they're more likely to carry forward their skills, they're more likely to take those out in their graduate attributes, they're more likely to be successful people in our economy, in South Africa, but also successful citizens for their families and for their communities, because that's just as important as economic success for me. And this is a summary of those things. It's about showing how it works, practicing before the high risk of doing it for the numbers at the end, for the marks, things that often students will think is the only thing that matters. But I think it matters that the journey to assessment, the summative assessment, that journey is well conceived, because if it isn't, then students are not being taught well enough, I would argue. Can I read this to you? This is powerful. My own students here, very quick story. When I first came into university, Edge Hill University, I inherited, I wrote a new degree called Education and Literacy. And the student body was 120 working mums. No men. No challenge for me, honest. Oh my God, scary. But they were wonderful women. They all had part-time jobs in schools. They all worked one afternoon in a week with me in the university and one evening. The rest of the time they were full-time working mums, etc., etc. And I took them through all of the things I'm talking to you about in a practical way. And then I interviewed them as part of my research, and I made this narrative up, which is a collective narrative. I was a student on the Skills for Personal Learning module, where the tutor put a piece of work on the projector and explained and showed how he assessed it. He talked out loud about how he was thinking about learning outcomes and the grading criteria, so we got a much better understanding of how it worked. It was useful to look at pieces of work and have a go at assessing and writing feedback, like the tutor did it. It felt good to discuss the connection between the marks and the grading criteria, and it gave us a good mindset so as to have a go at writing some feedback ourselves. We had a go at a short mock assignment, writing it together as a group. We passed it to another group, and they assessed it and wrote feedback, and we did the same with their piece. We had to justify why the piece was a pass, and why we had given the mark, and why we did give that mark by referring to the grading criteria. Making things explicit, rehearsing and practicing. Quickly. The next thing we did was write a short piece of the tutor assessed and wrote feedback. He called it formative assessment, and it was good practice for the real thing, at the end of the module, which was a piece of coursework. I felt that seeing what feedback is all about, writing it and discussing it, set us up to do better, and then we were just told about this, or given details in a handout. They'd lived it, not just read it. This was an extremely helpful way of easing us into the real assessment where marks are given. See, students are really hung up on this getting the marks. I understand it, I was the same. Seeing writing and assessment and feedback being produced in action gave us clear idea of what the purpose of feedback was and what was expected of us through no secrets approach. I always say no secrets approach is helpful. The activities also serve to get a sense of mutual support and community going in our group. Well, good learners work together, happy learners work in communities. That's not cheating. That's how the real world operates. That's how a good world operates. Things I would recommend include, this is, some of the English is a bit funny because I've taken it from the students themselves. The sequence of activity can be used in other subjects. These are education students. Could be used in other subjects and built upon into induction activities. I've obviously been talking to them about induction and transitions from primary school to secondary school, as a matter of fact. Us as second-year students could be used to contribute to such activities for first-year students. Hey, students as agents, as tutors, as peer reviewers, as peer supporters to the assessment process. This is them saying. I suggest showing pieces of written work and describing its qualities, for example, text projected up and annotated with comment bubbles and track changes in Microsoft Word. They were, that's what I mean, they were putting it all, showing how they were thinking about assessment into the piece of work. We kind of call it online assessment management now. What year do you think this was, gang? Any thoughts? Come on, help me out. No more teddy bears. 1998. This is about recycling. And then getting students to mark using criteria to write feedback and talk about it is valuable and powerful. Hey, this group of women were powerful. I put them in a virtual learning environment. I know. They took over it. They said, Mark, keep out. And they had problem solving, family problems. They were all working together, helping each other out. It was the technical advisors were people who were really smart and finding resources. Hey girls, all read this. And I put it online for you. But they really were quite a powerful group. I forgot what I was going to say now. It's a woman thing. Oh no, so it's a woman thing. Hey man, you be careful. A lot of this was a powerful group of women. Hey, the point I was going to make, when the government came, Mark, you remember this, subject reviews, Quality Assurance Agency. These were the highest performing students. And Stephen Jackson was one of their external examiners from the Quality Assurance Agency, UK. And Gordon Bathel, Professor Gordon Bathel, a wonderful man from Durham University. So they had very, very serious external examiners, the highest scoring, highest performing graduates in the university. And I think it's because they understood how it worked. They were empowered. In some ways, they were liberated by understanding how the system worked. So some messages about assessment, but some messages about inclusion. Joining it all up then, the glue I think is assessment and feedback for learning. And it's very simple. We want our students to be successful. It's got to be all about the learning and teaching. Student-focused learning and teaching. Not just some guy like me stood here, blah, 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 blah. PowerPoint. Occasional video to make you think I prepared something interesting. It's got to be about activities, and that's where I'll go tomorrow. So, assessment should be worth doing. In Liverpool we say it's not worth a carrot, or it's indeed donkey work. Back to the story. I taught my donkey to dance. I assessed it too, said Mark, but it isn't dancing, said Joe. Never said it had learned, said Mark. But I would propose to you, it's amazing what great teaching can do. It's amazing what assessment that's well conceived with formative components as well as summative. And if we open up the secrets, it's amazing what can happen for our students. So, I taught my donkey to dance and I assessed him too, but it isn't dancing, said Joe. I never said it, I learned. So, the power of story, the power of metaphor. What I would suggest to you, please use the tools and the stuff I've presented for you that you'll get online. If it means little differences, sometimes little differences can make a big difference to a student. That student who's not quite passing, they succeed and their life changes forever. Forever. That student is on the edge of excellence and becomes excellence and gets that badge of excellence, can go and do something special for themselves and their families and their community. That should make us all feel good. A very big thank you.